Development and Economic Development. I'm joined here by the co-chair, Patrona Jones-Rouser, Marty Nave, and Rita Paniagua, fellow councilors. And we have Carrie Quaglia, Eric Ennis, and Chris Albanese all here to talk about this incredible project that we've been working on for about 2 decades, it seems like. No, it's not that long, but for the last couple of years for a great housing project in the former Syracuse Developmental Center area up near Tipperary Hill. So, Eric, why don't you start?
Sure.
You could.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Councilor, and good morning, Councilors. So thanks for making the time available. So what we wanted to do was talk through the purpose of this conversation. We realize is the legislative request regarding the pilot schedule as it relates to SIDA, which was originally approved for the Syracuse Developmental Center. But at the same time, there really has been so much momentum and progress made, and just recently this past year with the demolition work that remains ongoing, with the addition of really just going through the plan and some of the updates to the master plan for the SDC site itself. So with that being said, we want to just thank Carrie Quaglia, part of Home Headquarters, our CEO of Home Headquarters, as well as Chris Albanese, who I'm flanked on both sides here. And just I'll talk through really just to provide a progress report, and then we certainly want to make sure that we leave time for any questions and go from there. Thank you. All right, so one of the things that we do have here is we wanted to, we wanted to just talk through and just give a little bit of a refresher on the Syracuse Developmental Center and just some of the history leading up to today. So as the council is aware, this is a 48-acre campus and was foreclosed by the city of Syracuse through tax foreclosure in 2019. The city went through a process to identify a development partner and worked with a real estate broker, and ultimately in 2021, identified the Albanese organization, and a committee ultimately moved forward with the selection of Albanese. In 2022, the state of New York, through a partnership with Governor Hochul, had awarded $29 million to the city of Syracuse to be able to undertake a full demolition of the structure that you see here today, which is over 660,000 square feet, as well as new roadway and other critical infrastructure. You know, one of the things I would really just note is that the partnership with New York State has really been critical, and we appreciate just the forward-thinking investment really from the state of New York and from Empire State Development, because of the fact that really trying to bring to fruition this demolition and site clearance really would almost be infeasible if it weren't for the state of investment to take down the structure that has been so blighted and challenging to work with. So with that being said, that really kind of fast forwards us. As the council is aware, we were able to present the conceptual master plan. The council was able to formally approve and adopt that plan in June of 2023. And so this plan that we're going to talk about today is still very much in keeping with that master plan that was presented. We were able to do robust community outreach and feedback at the time, and a lot of that feedback then factored into the plan as it stands today. And then most recently, and it's a big reason why we're joined by Home Headquarters now, is that as we are working on the preliminary phase number 1 for the SDC project, it does now include a memorandum of understanding that's been executed between the Albanese organization as well as Home Headquarters to build the townhomes that will be featured and incorporated as part of the project. So just to walk through the timeline and really what has taken place over this past year. So the city, after going through a competitive bid process, had selected Ritter and Parator Construction, or RPCI, which has been undertaking the demolition for the better part of the past year. In May of 2024, after a mobilization period, demolition has been well underway, again on the entire 660,000 square foot structure that we have always known as the Syracuse Developmental Center campus. And then in June 14th of this past year, we were joined by Governor Hochul and members of the New York State Assembly and Senate to really, I think, just it was more of a momentum and being able to celebrate the fact that demolition had formally gotten underway. And so one of the things that Governor Hochul has talked about as part of this project is really just the importance of the new housing that this project will be able to bring to bear and being able to make use of a blighted vacant campus. And then continuing on, April of 2024, and then actually I should say 2025, so my apologies. But projected date of substantial completion, we are targeting for April of 2025. That work will be completed on the demolition that remains underway. And lastly, 2025, as we look at the year ahead, we will be moving forward with putting construction bids out for the infrastructure work. Once the demolition work is completed, that's where the utilities, the roadway infrastructure, there's really the critical infrastructure that will be necessary in order to create a brand new neighborhood. All of that work will begin by putting those bids out, selecting those contractors to do that work, and that will break ground. While it will be prior to the formal development happening, it really is a piece that we want to dovetail between the private development itself and and making sure that that new roadway infrastructure is tied in nicely. So one of the things I just want to do is really just some visual images, and then I'm going to turn it over to the architect and the design team from SWBR. Many of you will recall just how challenging the building was for so many years when it sat vacant. It was a very big challenge for code enforcement, so I think my fellow colleagues in codes are delighted and excited that this is coming down, as well as Syracuse Police and Syracuse Fire. But this is just a shot. A lot of these are over the past 6 to 9 months demolition, and this was the back portion structure where there was a gymnasium, a bowling alley, and a swimming pool. One of the things they were doing were taking off the entire brick facade. So brick by brick, they were taking away the entire masonry envelope of the building. I am pleased to say that every single masonry brick has been hauled off of this site today. So there are no more bricks officially a part of the building. And as we'll get to some of the photos in a moment, the vast majority of the site is cleared as it stands today.
Eric, I think maybe if we could have a little historical context. I was on the council. This property was state property, of course, for a long time. And then it passed into the hands of two different people who never did anything up there. It became like a real problem up in the neighborhood, witnessed by, of course, this damage and destruction that happened in these buildings too.
Correct.
So it's never been on the tax rolls before, ever.
Correct. Yep.
For 150 years.
Correct.
So that's an important thing when we consider this pilot. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's certainly one of the things I'm happy to talk about now, as well as our conversations or with questions. But at the time when the state ultimately had closed down the SDC property in 1998, and so for that period there was a time where it was being used for administrative offices, and then but the vast majority of the building was really underutilized, and as well as at that time the state determined it wanted to put up the property for sale through a private auction. So it went with the highest bidder. There was a development plan that was discussed but never came to fruition. So really, for the better part of the last 15 years, not only has the building sat vacant and really not well managed, but since the 1850s, it has not been contributing on the tax rolls. And even when it was under private ownership, part of the reason why we were able to seize it through tax foreclosure is it was never a contributing property for the city tax rolls. So just to show just a few more images here, and then I'm going to turn it over, just to be able to show the size and scale. I mean, that is an excavator that is operated by Ritter and Parator. This is all over the past summer as the demolition work was well underway. And this is where we start to really see and show the scale, the size, and the progress on the demolition itself. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that CNS companies, and we're joined by representatives from CNS here in the audience. CNS has been a tremendous partner working with the city. The council was able to authorize us to work with CNS on not just a demolition plan as part of the bidding package, but then now they're working with us on the roadway design. They're doing construction and inspection monitoring, and so we're able to get these photos due to that partnership with CNS, and they're keeping us informed on the progress. So this is just a shot of some of the crawl spaces as well, and a new construction word I've added to my vocabulary is concrete caissons. So the building itself, there's been a tremendous amount of work with the steel structure has now been removed, but there are still these concrete caissons, and so the work is now beginning to get underway with formally demolishing and removing that concrete as well. Just a couple shots again as well. These were recently taken this fall, just to be able to show you how much work is going in with the actual removal, making sure everything is hauled off-site. The other thing I want to make sure is to emphasize is that this project, because of the contract with Empire State Development, is that there is a 30% MWBE utilization goal. So one of the things is that the demolition contractor is meeting those 30% MWBE utilization goal, and because of the size and scale of this contract, that is to the tune of millions of dollars to make sure that minority and women-owned businesses are part of the opportunity for this project. So again, just showing you what you're looking at here is, again, it's actually looking towards the city skyline, so you can start to see downtown and the University Hill campus in the distance. But all of this demolition work has been well underway since work got started in May of this year. So really, with that said, I'm going to turn it over now to Eli Sands, an architect with SWBR. SWBR has been working closely both with the Albany's organization and now with Home Headquarters. And really, we just wanted to use this as an opportunity to update the council on the latest as far as the master plan as well as phase 1.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, everyone. My name is Eli Sands, address 283 River Street, Troy, New York. I am a landscape architect with SWBR, and I am here representing the design team for the Albany's organization. Also with me today is Joe McNinch, project architect and project manager for SWBR, and Shane O'Connor from TDK, civil engineer for the project. It's my pleasure to be presenting to you the current master plan design for 800 South Wilbur. What we'll be doing is looking at a high level, sort of 30,000 feet in the air overview of the project, and then we'll zoom in a little bit more closely on phase 1 amenities which are currently being designed. Next slide. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is our current illustrative master plan. As Eric mentioned, this property is on the west side of Syracuse, is a little bit south of the zoo, which is on the northwest corner of the drawing right now. And the real sort of overall design intention of this development is to create a new neighborhood that isn't isolated from the existing context of this or surrounding residences, but is actually opening up and allowing them access into it to try to truly integrate itself into this community. Next slide. So as Eric just went over, this project is currently being demolished, and what you see on this slide right now is just some of the neighborhood context that we were trying to observe when we brought into our design, specifically some of the townhomes and residential scale that you see right there on the street, and how we can take that and start to bring that into our development. Next slide. So here we have the illustrative master plan, and I'm going to talk about the phasing. Next slide. So phase 1 is what we're going to be talking mostly about today. This includes building A and B, which are each 5-story buildings with 133 in building A and 128 in building B. We are also showing 27 townhomes. Those townhomes will be owner occupied with an affordable market rate, and the building A and B would also be affordable market rate as well units. And we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end of the presentation.
And we'll coordinate, of course, the building of both large buildings and Carrie's building.
Yeah, so building A and B is being led by the Albany's Organization Development, and HHQ is leading the townhome development, but it is a partnership with our design team and both of them and the city in developing this project.
So when do we look forward to breaking ground on that? Do we have a date?
Yeah, so well, right now, this is a critical partner here is going to be New York State HCR Homes and Community Renewal, as well as the Housing Finance Agency with the state. So we've been having direct conversations with the state about the second half of 2025. And so what that allows us to do is that the demolition work is going to continue through the spring, as we've talked about, and then working on the infrastructure and making sure that critical infrastructure is ready. So I think that times the project well for that second half of next year for the development to be able to break ground and get underway.
We can go to the next slide.
Sure.
So this slide is showing future phases. So phase 3, which is going to be building C, which is sort of wrapped in the purple dashed line there, that is going to be senior housing, senior affordable housing, approximately 100 units. The building size is TBD, but it'll probably be between 3 to 5 stories, and will also include some additional townhome development as well. And this phase could also be combined with future phases that could also include phase 2 or 3, which is building D, which is the market rate housing, which is also going to be 100 units, 3 to 5 stories, as well as additional townhome development. Next slide. Additionally, there is the also future phase of the project, which is you see there in the tech light industrial area. This is currently still TBD to find our anchor partner, but Eric is working with the city and Center State to find an anchor partner for this development. Next slide.
Is there a timeline on that at all, Eric?
Yeah, so
you know my feelings on that.
I do, yeah. Here's maybe just briefly, if I'll speak to this for just a minute. When we first set out with this project, we knew housing was a really key use that was going to be here. That came through. with the community as well as part of the feedback. But the other thing was job creation and economic opportunity. The example I like to give is right now TTM Companies is doing a very large expansion out in the town of DeWitt.
My
So-
IDA.
Exactly. So Councilor, you're very
TTM.
familiar with that project. And so what I like to say is that if TTM right now said, hey, we want to be doing a similar project, or we want to do a project in Syracuse of that size and scale, it's a $125 million project. And I will tell you, if they were to call me and say, from an economic development standpoint, where in Syracuse could we do that project, I would be hard pressed to be able to identify sites where that would be feasible. One of the reasons why we think this is such an opportunity is that you have ample acreage that is contiguous land that is right there for these types of companies. And as we look towards the future, as we look at towards suppliers that could be servicing and supporting Micron and the investments in clay, there are very limited Syracuse sites where we have the ability to create similar job creation. Given the fact that this is also on the doorstep of the Near West Side, Skunk City, and surrounding neighborhoods, that type of job creation we believe is a tremendous opportunity. So as it stands today, and I will fully recognize, we are working on how do we identify and who could be the anchor tenant for this.
Logistically, it'd be an issue with all the housing going up, and then all of a sudden, like manufacturing facility or something like that, come in later.
Yeah.
And we got families and they're, going in and out of there.
Yep.
It's going to be a difficult.
It's a good point. And what I would say is we're working with, and I think that's a big reason why, as we've looked at the initial designs for how that can be laid out and constructed, we need to make sure it's done in well coordination with the housing projects themselves. So again, we view it as a great opportunity within a limited number of sites in the city where we can create that type of job creation. But to your point, Counselor, it needs to be done well and thoughtful.
And it needs to be done timely too. I mean,
Yep.
we're going to be breaking ground, he said, next year, at the end of next year.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have somebody come to.
And I think within the last week, the fact that now the Commerce Department has executed that agreement with Micron, I think that, there's a number of different steps, and I think there's forward momentum that I think makes a site like this even more attractive than maybe it was just a week ago.
Additionally, before we drill down into phase one, there's also a concurrent part of phase one that the city is leading, which is the development of the ring road design. The ring road design that you see coming up from South Wilbur and going throughout the property, that is being designed by the city and CNS with feedback from our team. That roadway design will include not just an ample two-way lanes, but also include bike lanes, a vegetated strip with street trees, as well as an extra wide pedestrian pathway to allow for a really just neighborhood feeling and a real quality of life for this development. So zooming in a little bit more on phase one. So phase one is kind of broken into two separate projects. We have one is the townhomes, and the second part is building A and B. As I mentioned earlier, the townhomes are being led by HHQ as our partner developer. HHQ really was interested in bringing diversity into this development. And so what we were trying to do with these townhomes, we're A, trying to make them owner-occupied, and B, to try to take advantage of the site to provide some really unique opportunities. And with the elevation of this site being fairly significant, we saw a series of stacked townhomes with a variety of conditions, either garages like you would have across from Building A at the top of the road, or with buried basements. And these townhomes would have one-to-one parking per unit. They'd be about 3 stories tall, and they'd be single unit occupied. And we'd have additionally, besides garages and other amenity spaces, we'd have sidewalks and direct connections with the larger amenity spaces we're building for the central development of Building A and B. So Building A and B, I'll sort of talk about these together. These are going to be affordable for rent units. Again, Building A is going to have 133 units plus a super. Building B is going to have 128. It's going to be a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And the intention for the site design of this layout is our intention is to have one-to-one parking for both the buildings. And we really want to create a real sense of site amenity spaces. So what you see there in Building A, the plaza, we really want to create that entrance experience and elevate the sort of arrival moment for people coming into our development. So we're highlighting, a water feature, really nice shaded seating areas for the tenants, and also some really nice planting areas as well. In the between Building A and B, that is where we're focusing more on the development, sort of building out our future green spaces for here. So we're starting off with our playground, which will be thematically connected to the zoo. We're also going to create some more respite spaces for the tenants. And as you move up the site to the north, what we're going to create is a shared street, so it'll create pedestrian-friendly connections, but still allow for emergency vehicular access throughout the site. And then we'll have our feature sort of ramp and stair system that will allow for accessible access and easy access for all members of this development to be able to access all pieces of the site, which as you can see there behind the playground and park.
Hey, Eli, could I just ask too, because I think one of the things for the council, I just wanted to have Carrie as well as Chris just to be able to speak to as well, just the involvement and home headquarters as well as just the Albany's organization for their respective pieces. Carrie, maybe could we start with you just on the townhomes?
Sure. Well, first off, I can't tell you how pleased Home Headquarters is to be involved in this project, particularly because I think it highlights what Home Headquarters does best, which is owner-occupied housing. As Eli mentioned, the plan is for 27 townhome units. These would be 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, sort of starter homes, right? 9 of them will have garages. The topography on this site, as you can imagine, is pretty challenging, so you can have garages for all 27 units, but there would be dedicated parking for each. So as far as the source of funds, as you know, we're building 40 scattered site homes in the city right now, primarily on the south side, Tipperary Hill, and the near west side. We used the first round of a new governor's initiative called the AHOP program, Affordable Homeownership Opportunity Program. And it provided a fairly deep subsidy, but that subsidy wasn't in and of itself enough. But fortunately for us, the administration and the council also approved ARPA funds as we were building those 40 homes. We see this as a logical next step because we'd be using the same sort of funds from the state. With these funds, though, we can go up to 100% of median. And just to give you, that's a little bit more generous than usual. So just to give you some idea, a family of 4 could earn up to $94,800 and still qualify for these townhomes. A family of 3 could earn up to $85,400 and still qualify for these townhomes, be under 100% of median. I know I've talked to y'all individually about this, and the first question that comes up is, well, what do you think you can sell them for? And as you know, we're building homes in the Tipperary Hill neighborhood right now. We expect these would have a sales price somewhere between $225,000 to $250,000, which really kind of makes them affordable. As owner-occupied housing, any pilot that is approved would not apply to the owner-occupied housing. But the owner-occupants, with our help, can apply for the 485-0 exemption, which would phase in the city and school taxes over a 7-year period. That right now does not apply to the county taxes, but the city and school taxes would be phased in. So the taxes, even for the first 7 years, would be very affordable. And we're just really anxious to get moving with this.
So Eli, maybe if we could, I just wanted to show some of the visuals
Absolutely.
As well, and then I think I'll turn it over to Chris Albanese as well. So give me a second while I zoom out here. And
Eric, that extra capital money, I mean, what ended up costing $13 million, it'll cost to demolish the whole structure and everything else.
approximately in that ballpark
And so
range.
that extra capital money, that $16 million will go into the project too for the public
So
infrastructure?
the infrastructure, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So there's flexibility built in with the state funds to be able to support the infrastructure in addition to the demolition, and so that is where now we're working on the putting out to bid the critical infrastructure work that will
And do
come
we still
next.
are we still in like negotiations with the county about the zoo?
Correct. Yep. So very productive conversations underway. One of the things that was done is that portion of land has been carved out from this development plan, and the reason why is to be able to make a coordinated plan with the county in terms of the ability to partner with the zoo.
So that will come for us to cede that property?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So any sale of and change of title when we get ready in that stage, that will require council
It's for
authorization.
giraffe exhibit, I guess?
Well, I think one
So
of the
you
things.
could have a chance to get in one of these apartments and staring out a window and having a giraffe staring at you?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be something.
well, and I-
Something Marty might consider if he ever moves off the north side. Maybe.
I don't know.
I think we believe there's a captive audience that'll
So are
find that
we gonna
interesting.
have like a McDonald's just for seniors? You're gonna put a McDonald's for,
So I see a bus, he wants a bus, I guess.
so you have to go to,
Well, one of the things I'm just going to do, I'm going to let
Maybe
Eli
a little
break
Yes.
down the visuals, and then again, we actually have a nice visual too of the playground, and I think that's where we want to make a zoo connection as well that I'll let Eli talk about, but and then I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Yeah, so what you're seeing on the screen right now were some early renderings we were doing when we were still working through the master plan phase. So these are currently a little out of date, but the design intent is still there. What we're trying to create that moment of arrival when you come into this development. So you're seeing the building there framed really nicely with the plaza in the foreground, those trees providing some context and scale to that larger building, creating that shaded seating area. What's missing here are some of those more feature elements that we're getting into now that we're into design, like that water feature and maybe some of those other elements. Next slide. And here you,
So, we've been very focused on the exterior design and to make sure these buildings look beautiful. And what, they're long buildings, but by breaking up the facade every 50 to 75 feet, it gives it a nice neighborhood feel.
are you having a
This is-
community meeting rooms as well?
We will in the buildings. We'll have gyms for the residents and lounge and community room for the residents. Yes.
Oh, good, we can get our photos out of the archives, for the old north side.
Is it still just one way in, one way out?
So access to the site, it's a good point. So in addition to Wilbur Ave, there is a secondary entrance on Seymour. So it's very close to PSAL at Fowler, but that actually will be as well a viable path to be able to enter and exit out of the site as well.
and here you're seeing, again, another early version of some of our intents for the playground, but we really want, again, make this not just, we're buying some set and just plopping it down there, but we're really going to design this and connect it with the zoo, with the site, and with the neighborhood, and providing context and opportunities not just for, a typical child, but also for children who have special needs, sensory issues as well. So it's going to be universally designed.
That really runs it. The rest is, I think, just another reiteration of the master plan. But Chris, I think I'll turn it over to you. Just maybe speak a little bit more just about buildings A and B and just the Albany's organization updates.
Sure. So we're thrilled to be developing this project. This has been a great, public-private partnership. It's moved quicker than we could have imagined. The city council, the IDA, the neighborhood, everyone has pushed this project forward. And it's been supportive, so we really appreciate that. This is what we do. We build great housing. As most people know, we have a large project in Suffolk County, Long Island, which is also on 40, 50 acres, and we're now completing our 5th building. These 2 buildings will have 261 units. It's a mix of studios to 3 bedrooms, so studios 1s, 2s, and 3s. And under the state program, the average AMI can't exceed 60. So the majority of the buildings are 50, 60, 70% AMI, with some at the 80, only 8 at the 30%, and a chunk at the 80%. And we will be as we are down in Suffolk County. There we have a park, ice skating ring, etc. The land here, the slope makes it just beautiful property overlooking the city. We'll have these walkways so people could take a long walk and circle throughout the property. We'll have some amenities at the top of the property, some seating area overlooking the site as well as the city. Eric recently mentioned to me a memorial for the people who had lived at SDC over the decades. We're 100% supportive of that. I think a good place would be up toward the top of the property where we'll have seating areas and the walking paths. we're eager to break ground the second half of 2025. Construction will be approximately 33 months. And, we'll be leasing apartments and people will be living here before you know it.
I think what you just mentioned was an example of how collaborative this has been over the last few years. I was contacted by members of Arise, and they brought up an interesting proposal. They will have some sort of memorial up there for the people that used to live at the Syracuse Developmental Center, and which had different names for it in less enlightened times. And I think that'll be really important. It's just illustrative. You've worked with us all the way through. We've admired your buildings down in Long Island. In fact, we were just talking about the difficulty of people in New York City, working class people, to find affordable units. And the same thing's happening up here. But this is going to be maybe a template for the city going on. And I'm glad we chose you as a developer. I really am.
Thank you,
I
Councilor.
think this is great because we talk a lot about lack of housing. Here we're building new housing. We take a dilapidated building. My aunt actually worked at the developmental center. I remember going in there with her. So, and I can remember you could hear the noise from the elephants and tigers. And this is a great development. What we're doing is we're telling our citizens, we understand about a housing crisis. Look what we're doing, whether it's here or with Maria Regina Campos. We're working on this now. And we're doing it for, not for us, but for the next generation, for people who live in our area. And I think it's a very good testament. I really do.
So based on this, the other portion of townhouses that has not been identified for anyone?
So I think what I'll do, maybe I'll go first. So phase one is really where we are in terms of the financing. We're really identifying those financing sources and working on that, where you'll actually see the real development come into place. I think because of the partnership that's being forged now with Albany's, with really the multifamily housing that they specialize in, and then the ongoing work, and Home Headquarters knows this market and knows this region probably just about better than anyone. So I think that the goal here is a lot of the energy and focus is on phase one, but I think then the opportunity presents itself for then how does this partnership expand with the future phases. So I'll let Carrie or Chris add anything to that, but I think that's.
We would certainly hope and expect that there'd be owner-occupied housing in the subsequent phases, certainly.
Okay.
And we would want them to do it.
And then, of course, there'll be the market rate building and the senior citizen building, too.
Correct. So that would be building C and D. And as far as timing, it would be our goal to break ground on those buildings. In an ideal world, as we're finishing and leasing buildings A and B.
And go on,
Oh, I was
Counselor.
just going to ask, C&D is a mix of market rate and
And
affordable.
seniors.
Oh, also.
So one building would be seniors, and we'd be hoping to do that through HCR, and the other building would be 100% market. And those buildings are slotted to be about 100 units each. It would be nice if we could get it to about 125 units each. There's economies there, and then the rest of the property would be filled out with townhomes.
And the apartments will be just for leasing.
I'm sorry?
This is the buildings are leasing.
They'd be for rent.
The
For rent.
apartments.
Oh, yeah. The multifamily building C and D would just be for rent. The townhomes would be ownership.
When you say like trying to go from 100 to 125, like in the market rate, any kind of help we can give you in something like that, because we want to make it, of course, a balanced community and all that.
Right.
Is that a possibility, you think, Chris? Or because it seems, just from around here, downtown, and my knowledge of Tipperary Hill, it seems whatever kind of apartments you build, market rate apartments, they would definitely be filled.
Right. I agree. I think that interest rates are coming down. At the 6.5%, 7%, that really put a a break on housing all over the country. Interest rates are coming down, and clearly, with Micron coming, it's going to push market rate rents up. You know, Micron, we've had this conversation. They don't want to be in the housing business. They're going to have to be in the housing business because there needs to be more housing. Eric did introduce me to Micron. I had a preliminary conversation with them. I know they're focusing on breaking ground, and they just got their grant agreement signed. But I plan on having future conversations with them, and maybe one or both of these buildings are net leased to them.
I mean, what we know on the other side of Montgomery Street, that as part of the county IDA, is that demographically, I think they'd be very attracted, the people that come in and work from Micron. There's going to be a lot of younger folks, and that who are techies, basically.
And not everyone wants to live in the suburbs. This is
Right, exactly.
Baseball throw from downtown Syracuse. So, well, with a stronger arm than mine, but
Yeah.
so.
It's a walk. It's a walk to Tipperary Hill, which has the same amenities sometimes as downtown Syracuse,
Right.
too. So.
Yeah, maybe the last finer point I would put on that is just that this is one of several examples where the city is I think, working tremendously hard to position itself so that new housing is coming online, in addition to the housing strategy and the work to improve and invest in the housing stock that we do currently have as well, so that we are well prepared for any professional coming in or people that are being able to capitalize on these opportunities and I know so much of this is a Micron-focused conversation, but companies and job opportunities that are being created as a region, we firmly believe Syracuse is where people should be looking for future housing opportunities.
This country as a whole is not building enough housing.
Exactly.
And the problem is nationwide. It's worse in cities. I mean, Syracuse, Buffalo, New York. We are just not building enough housing, and rents in downstate just keep on becoming unaffordable, and we're just not building enough housing. Part of that is there have been a lot of roadblocks downstate to building housing. Fortunately, that's not happening in other parts of the state.
And I know I've met with your group, but my memory is not well. Who's the project manager? Who's
For the
manager?
properties?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
Not project manager, property
Property
manager.
manager.
I'm sorry, yes.
We do our own property management.
Okay,
When we
that's what I thought.
first started building in Suffolk County, we hired a third-party manager, very reputable company. We fired them. Then we hired a national company, Bizzuto, who's I'm sure very good at managing their own buildings, but as a third-party manager, they were not doing it to our standards, and we terminated them, and we do it ourselves. So we plan on doing ourselves up here because we have, and again, I'm not patting myself on the back, we want it run a certain way, and we have not found third-party managers to do that. So we're long-term owners, and we've discovered the only way to run the properties the way we want them run is to manage them ourselves.
Yeah, that's so important, Councilor Jones-Rouser, and I know the rest of us councilors have talked about that too, but the management aspects of a lot of these buildings, the buildings you don't hear about is because they're managed well.
Right.
And I know in your background, with your name on it, I think that's
Right.
important, that we bring that up.
Thank you. And we will obviously hire local people to be the supers and the boots on the ground, but it'll be, they'll be working,
Off your template.
off our template. And likewise, obviously, for the construction, we're using a local contractor, but we will supervise that contractor.
Are we going to talk about the pilot?
So I was going to move to that next.
Kathy,
So,
you can move up here in the front row if you want to talk.
well, so
You sure you don't want to be up here? Come on, it's the first time you never wanted to be in the front row.
Come on, shoot at the table, Liz.
Go ahead.
So just briefly, so our goal today, we wanted to be able to inform and be able to share just the tremendous progress that's been made on the demolition, give the update to the master plan, and a key element of this, which is part of the legislation that is currently before you, is a request to authorize a pilot term. So this is a 30-year term that's part of phase one of the project. And Kerry already mentioned this during his remarks, but this is strictly related to buildings A and B. The townhomes, because of the fact that they're owner-occupied, are not a part of the pilot, which was approved earlier this month by the Syracuse Industrial Development Agency. And so what is required as a next step is bringing this before the council for authorization as part of a deviation from that standard.
Now, this won't apply to C and D, or will apply to C and D?
So this will apply
We'll have a
to
separate,
buildings A and B, correct?
okay,
And
so this is the ones we're building right now.
Correct.
So later on, this is, by the way, this is Kathy Murphy from CITA. She's my counterpart.
Chair of the Syracuse Industrial Development Agency. If the applicant or developer wishes to seek benefits from the IDA, including a pilot for buildings C or D, then they will make a new application.
And so, so just
So can we ask, why wouldn't we do it for everything now?
So the piece with that, and we've looked at this through procedurally as well as from a legal perspective, is that we will be creating a re-subdivision plan that will result in a re-subdivision for both creating the 27 townhome units as well as buildings A and B. The city's intent and what was ultimately outlined in the purchase and sale agreement with Albany's that was executed is that the city will retain the land until the point when we are ready for phase 2 to commence. And so part of the thought process behind that has been, it's our desire that we'd like to be able to have ultimately that site control of that land. We also realize that Albany's and home headquarters want to be able to focus in on getting the structures and developments underway, but really on the land that is ready to go for this first phase. That also gives the city the ability to then work collaboratively. Something that the council will be deeply involved with is ultimately the future parcels that will be created for building C and D in those respective townhomes. Those would be separate, but that's land that the city will retain for the time being. And so therefore, the pilot, we wouldn't have the ability to put any sort of pilot agreement on city-owned land. But the opportunity presents
Yes,
itself for the
obviously.
future phases.
We're obviously hoping for such great success on phase 1 that the next 2 buildings come right back, as Chris said earlier.
In addition to the townhomes.
Right.
I mean, obviously, this is a very, it's not an, I guess you could say it's an unusual pilot than I've seen before. It's more sort of a shelter tax agreement.
Correct.
deal.
It really does mimic more like a shelter rent. You're right.
Maybe just to speak to that, because that was part of the structure that is before you. So the way that this is laid out, again, it is over a term of that's commensurate for 30 years. We've had direct conversations with HFA at the state level, and again, that stands for the Housing Finance Agency. Due to the size and scale of the project and the source of the financing, one of the things that is critical in order to secure that HFA funding that would allow this project to proceed is that it does have to be at the local level. That property tax abatement and that pilot does need to be on the same timeline, and it needs to be commensurate with the HFA financing. So part of the reason why the request before you is what it is because of the fact that this term will be in lockstep with what HFA will be financing the project.
Okay, so that makes sense. As far as with the two buildings, this is the only way we can structure a pilot quite like this with the HFA involvement, right?
And it was based on direct negotiations between the city as well as with Albany, so it's based on a per unit basis. So Counselor, to your point, you're exactly right. This is structured in a similar way.
Hearing that. Councilors
I
love hearing that.
You know, I'm happy to say it. So I share that because this is similar to that shelter rent tax agreement that the council has seen before and is very familiar with for other projects here in Syracuse. It's on a per unit basis with also an escalator built in. So the fact that every year you're seeing that start to increase on a 2% basis. The point was made at the top of our meeting today, but the point I just want to reiterate, for the better part of 150 years for the history of this property, this has never been a tax contributing property for the tax rolls. What we are talking about now today, not only what I view as a tremendous opportunity visually and we're meeting a critical need for housing in this community, but also the fact of this is going to be directly contributing to the tax rolls for the city as well. Part of the schedule, as you'll see, and again, this was already approved by CITA, is over the course of that 30-year period, $10,323,000 and change is what the city will be, will ultimately, again, this is a partnership where the city is doing the collection on those payments. That will be collected over that 30-year period from the developer.
And the reason you're coming before us is it exceeds the UTEP, correct?
It
Okay.
exceeds
Tax
our
exempt.
current UTEP, so it requires common council approval.
You know, Kathy's citas have been an invaluable partner, and Evans, we appreciate your involvement here.
It's been our pleasure. I mean, we are very excited about this project and, believe that this is going to be a transformative project for the neighborhood.
Initially, I'm skeptical of that the whole property being part of the pilot, but now with the explanation of HCR and HFC and all that, obviously this makes eminent sense with the way it's structured here, so. Any questions about the pilot agreement about my fellow counselors?
I just want to comment, DEC, everything has been cleared up, right?
Correct. Yeah, so one of the things that was done is we had to do necessary testing from an environmental standpoint. And then part of the reason why the partnership, and we brought on CNS working on the city's behalf, they're doing direct construction monitoring, demolition work is underway, they're doing direct on-site testing. We have another third party that's doing that from an environmental standpoint. So when we were first beginning this demolition work, we were very clear with the neighborhood and the community is that we are working to make sure that from all regulations environmentally is that we're containing all of that on site. And so that has been well underway over the past year.
How old was that building? When was that constructed?
Yeah, so the current structure as it exists today was completed in 1970. Council may recall, there's been numerous buildings that have been on the site in the past, dating back to
I remember
the...
the 60s, yeah, so I don't know when it first, opened up its first phase. It was back like 60, 70 years ago.
Correct, yeah.
What was there before?
Yeah, I will say this is a hobby of mine, but I'm an OHA member, so a shout out to the
Me
Onondaga
too.
Historical Association. I've gone to the OHA and just
Yeah.
been able to look through their old files. And so there's some incredible photos, including of when this structure was being built back in 1970. So here we are, fast forward in 2024 with the removal of it. But again, we're looking forward to what's next.
All right, thank you.
So maybe the very last point I just want to make is I want to thank you for your time. Also, if there's additional questions, please let me know. The only point I was just going to make is there's other members of the team here. This has been a collaborative effort between the city and the council, but I'd be remiss to, Mary Robinson from engineering, I think not a day has gone by that Mary and I have not called, texted, or emailed over the course of this project and getting things moving. Matt OJ and just all the support from city assessment in order to really be forward thinking about what this project means for the city and for the tax rolls. And again, NBD has been one of several different departments to make this a reality. And certainly thanks to Kathy and the leadership of the board from CITA.
And all the private folks that have supported this too. I'd be remiss if not mentioning Janice McKenna, the Tipperary Hill Neighborhood
Absolutely.
Association, organized all the meetings, has been very supportive of this project, and I think she talked at the Planning Commission.
Yes, yeah, we had the opportunity for...
Spoke at the IDA as well.
So
Yeah.
that's terrific.
And in the spirit of that, I'd just like to call out Lowell Nimitz, who's our construction director,
Yes,
who's
I
been
know
front and
Lowell.
center with this.
Okay. So any other questions? Okay, I'll ask for an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I know it. Thank you, Eric. Absolutely. This is awesome.
We're excited.
Super exciting.
Yes, that's what I was going to do. He asked me for a copy.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
I am